So good evening everybody, welcome to the Dark Artisan. I'm James, I'm one of Harry's patrons, and tonight he's let me run loose with the new Ynnari White Dwarf Index. I'll be giving you my opinion on a few things about it, and bearing in mind it is just my opinion. I will never claim to be the most or the best Ynnari player. I've only really sort of started teasing about with the Ynnari side of it, and to be honest, with the way it's gone, it may be the last time for a while, until I can work out the finesse of the new army. There's been a lot of big changes with it, a lot of abilities, but with the release of the new FAQ, the way they've done it kind of links in very heavily with that, and it makes more sense now the big FAQ is out. So I guess the first thing we'll talk about is keywords. Straight away replacing the keyword Craftwell, Cabal, Witch Cult or Mask, you replace with Reborn as Ynnari, Reborn Takari, Reborn Takari for the Witch Cult, and Reborn Harlequin. So that means get rid of the first lot and replace everything with those. Also, the other big thing is you can't have any Eldari named character as part of your Ynnari army anymore. So that includes Eldrad, which I found quite surprised. I thought he was intricate and key to the Ynnari. In the fluff that is, so it seems a surprise that you can't use him, or whether that will change later on. Also, you can't use Mandrakes, Avatar Cave or Solitaires anymore, which was a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, but I guess you can probably ally those in later on if you really want to. So if your army is battlefield, all troop units in Ynnari detachments, excluding super heavy auxiliary detachments, gain the Reclaim the Galaxy ability. In addition, if your army is battleforged, all Ynnari units, Ynnari detachments, excluding super heavy auxiliary detachments, gain the Strength and Death ability. So the Reclaim the Galaxy ability is essentially just all units with this ability, but within range of an objective marker, even if there are more enemy models within range of it, control it. So it's the same as your standard troops holding objectives thing. So yeah, pretty standard. We all knew that was going to come. Just means they can take and hold that. Now with the Strength from Death is basically the Soul Burst ability. So as soon as a unit is destroyed, all units from your army with this ability benefit from Soul Burst actions until the end of the turn. Whilst a unit is benefiting from Soul Burst actions, it always fights first in the fight phase, even if it didn't charge. If a model that is benefiting from the Soul Burst actions made a charged move this turn, or already has the ability that allows it to always fight first in the fight phase, then whilst it is benefiting from the Soul Burst actions, you also add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by that model. If the enemy unit that has made a charge move this turn, or that have abilities that allow them to always fight first in the fight phase, then alternate choosing units to fight with, starting with the player whose turn it's taking place. So pretty standard. That last bit happens in a lot of things, but yeah, Strength from Death now, it's a lot different, and it shows you that they're really trying to sort of, well, it seems to me that they're really trying to push the Ynnari into a combat style army rather than what people turned into, which seems to be very much a shooting based army that would just delete units very, very quickly. And to be honest, it was a bit of a plug and play army. I didn't think there was much finesse in the old Ynnari. I think a lot of people would agree with that. However, the new way, it just seems to have gone the other way. I think it's going to be, I think it may well be a fairly effective combat unit or combat based army, but it would have been nice if it was a more of an all-round or a well-rounded army rather than just a one-trick pony either way. But you know, we'll see what people make of it. So again, one of the other big things with the new Ynnari Index is the ability not to use any Craftworld, Harlequin or Takari stratagems with your Ynnari models, which is obviously what, again, other people used to plug in specific Craftworlds so they could use those stratagems. And the same with the Harlequins and everybody else, and you can't do that anymore. It's the same with psychic abilities. If it's the Ynnari specific psychic abilities, they can only be used on Ynnari models. And again, that bears out with what's just happened with the FAQ, with now only Asiana units being able to use the Doom. I'm not sure I think this is the best move. I understand why they've done it. Doom is so destructive, but I don't know. I guess it's, again, they're trying to push armies to have single factions and less soup, and maybe it will head that way. I'm not so sure. I think you'll find actually Ynnari lends itself to soup a bit better now with the combat side. So the Ynnari side of it will be the heavy combat element, and then I think maybe you'll start finding they'll be adding more units for shooting, so different detachments will come in for purely shooting and won't be Ynnari, but we'll see again what people make of it. So let's start looking at some of the characters. So for the 3 Ynnari characters, the only one that's had a points change is the Visage. He's dropped down to 120 now, which I think was probably well needed because he wasn't a character people ever really seemed to take. Essentially, none of the characters' stats have particularly changed at all. What has happened is, like for example, the Visage has just a new ability, which is Revered Figurehead. This model can now embark on an Eldari transport, even though the transport in question might normally only permit models with other faction keywords to do so. So it just means you can get your Visage and your Vrain actually to get in different vehicles and do different things. Now the other thing that the Visage has is Way of the Blade. Reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made with melee weapons by friendly Ynnari models whilst they're within 6 inches of this model. Now the Visage is an odd one. He doesn't appear to be that good, but with the addition of his Warlord trait, which we'll go through later, might make him a bit more of a beat stick, and actually might make him a more popular choice for people to take. Yeah, I think you might start seeing a few more of him around in different armies, or different lists I should say. Your Vrain's the same, again, same stats, mostly the same abilities, but she also gains Revered Figurehead, which is quite useful. Means you can use different vehicles to transport her around. And the Incarn's the same as he always has been. He has the Summoned for Death ability now, which I think he already had actually. I think that's the same as it was before, but again, yeah, stats haven't changed on any of these guys, their weapons haven't changed on any of these guys, just a few minor little tweaks here and there. You might well see the Visage a bit more. Your Vrain's always very popular, she's a good psyker. Ability of the +1 to cast is really useful, so I think definitely you'll start seeing a lot more of her around and a lot more of the Visage. So now let's look at Warlord traits. So obviously your named characters have set Warlord traits, but they're a bit odd. I think one of them in particular doesn't seem to fit with the character, but anyway, we'll get to that one in a minute. So the first one is Lord of Rebirth. This Warlord regains 1 lost wound at the start of each battle round. In addition, each time the Warlord would lose a wound on a d6 on a 5+, that wound is not lost. Yeah, really useful. It's always good to get that guarantee wound back, and it's also quite nice to be able to potentially not lose that wound. Next, Warden of Souls. Whilst the Warlord is benefiting from Soul Burst actions, add 1 to its attack and strength characteristic. Potentially quite nice. Really useful in certain situations. I'm going to do this one again, Harry. So next is Warden of Lost Souls, and this is actually the Incarn's Warlord trait, which is quite useful for him. Whilst the Warlord is benefiting from soul burst actions, add 1 to its attacks and strength characteristics. So that means now the Incarn is strength 7 and has 7 attacks. So that's actually quite nice. Just gives them that extra little bit of a buff. Means you're hitting a little bit harder, hitting things a little bit easier, and has more attacks. So you can't really go wrong with that. Next, Walker of the Many Paths. You can reroll 1 hit roll or wound roll made for this Warlord each turn. In addition, if your army is Battleforged, whilst this Warlord is on the battlefield, roll 1d6 each time you spend a command point to use a stratagem. On a 5+, that CP is immediately refunded. Now this is quite a useful one, I think, for that other stratagem where you can give another character a Warlord trait. You might decide to give it to a maybe a Troop Master. Let me do this one again. So next we have Walker of the Many Paths. This one you can re-roll 1 hit roll or wound roll made for this Warlord each turn. In addition, if your army is Battleforged while this Warlord is on the battlefield, roll 1d6 each time you spend a command point to use a stratagem. On a 5+, that CP is immediately refunded. Now I think this is a really good one for playing that stratagem that I said about earlier, about giving a second character a Warlord trait. Imagine giving this to a Troop Master or an Archon or a Succubus. I think this could be quite a useful one. They're farming command points, which is always really good. They get extra rerolls, which is always good. I think this could be quite a good secondary one. Next is Fear of the Grave. Enemy units must subtract 1 from their leadership casualty while they are within 6 inches of this Warlord. They must subtract 2 instead during any turn in which an enemy unit was destroyed by an attack made by this Warlord. So again, playing the other stratagem we talked about earlier, which gives them a -2 to the leadership. Potentially that's a -4 to some unit's leadership. Throwing a Hemlock into that, that's another -1. That's potentially a -5. So again, very situational, and a lot of things have to fall into place for it to work. But if it goes off, it could be potentially devastating. And again, maybe a Warlord trait you would give to a secondary character, unless you're obviously taking one of the main characters. And then we've got Yvraine's Warlord trait. Favoured of the Ynnari. Each time this Warlord piles in or consolidates, they can move up to 6 inches instead of up to 3. Now, I'm not sure why you would have Yvraine in combat. I think this may have been a better one for the Incarn, or possibly the Visage, but actually, again, both of their ones are pretty good on their own, but it just seems an odd one for her. But there you go. That's one I decided to give her. I mean, again, you could use this as a second for another character if you played that stratagem to give another character a Warlord trait. Possibly a good one for a Troop Master, again a Succubus, or maybe an Archon as well, or something like that. So maybe a good secondary backup one. And then finally we've got the Visage's one, Master of Death. Now I think this one is quite good. I think this may be another reason why you might see the Visage a little bit more. So each unmodified hit roll of 6 made for an attack with a melee weapon by this Warlord scores 2 hits instead of 1. So it gives the potential, again, yeah, you have to be rolling 6s, but it gives the potential for the Visage to become a little bit more of a beat stick. And a bit more exciting. And again, say if you've got the Incarn and the Visage, you can play 1 CP, they can both have their Warlord traits up and running. So it could be quite useful potentially. And that's Warlord traits done. Right, so next what we'll do is we'll start looking at some of the new Ynnari stratagems. And there's some good ones actually. There's some as with all stratagems, there's some very situational ones, but there's actually some really, really good ones, and some ones that with a bit of synergy with some of the other units and some Warlord traits can work really, really well. So first we have 1 CP, United in Death. Use this stratagem at the start of the fight phase. Select 1 reborn Ynnari, 1 reborn Harlequin and 1 reborn Dark unit from your army. Until the end of the phase, add 1 to the attack characteristics of each of these units whilst they're benefiting from soul burst actions. So again, situational, obviously you have to have an Ynnari, Harlequin and a Dark unit in your army, but potentially could be quite useful having that +1 to the attack characteristic is very, very nice. More attacks the better, especially when you've got units like witches and harlequins troops in there. Next, 2 CP, Shrine of the Whispering God. Use this stratagem before the battle. Select up to 3 units of Ynnari Incubi from your army. Each of these units gains the Strength from Death ability, even though Incubi units cannot normally have this ability. So if you want to run Incubi in your army and you want to really benefit from that combat ability, then yeah, 2 CP, probably worth using. You can make cheap battalions with these guys, so yeah, well worth doing, and get those Incubi out there. Next, for 2 CP, we've got Ynnari's Net. Use this stratagem at the start of the charge phase. Select 1 Ynnari biker unit from your army. That unit can charge even if it advances turn. So yeah, potentially situationally, yeah, could be quite good. 1 CP, Reborn Together. Use this stratagem at the start of the morale phase. Until the end of that phase, add 2 to the leadership characteristic of all Ynnari units from your army that are within 6 inches of any other friendly Ynnari unit. So yeah, makes them a lot tougher to break in morale. Not normally a huge issue with any of the Eldari armies, Drakari, any of them, because normally they're fairly small units, but if you decide you want to pump out big units of witches, big units of storm guardians possibly, larger units of banshees, striking scorpions, maybe it'll help out a bit. Yeah, it could be useful. Next, for 2 CP, Whispering Spirits. Use this stratagem when an enemy unit takes a morale test whilst within 1 inch of any Ynnari unit from your army, but before the test is taken. Subtract 2 from the enemy's leadership characteristic until the end of the phase. Now normally leadership ones aren't normally that big a deal, there's normally ways to mitigate and get around it, but there's a couple of other ways with this that you can increase that leadership debuff. One of the warlord, I think it's one of the warlord traits, or a relic. I think I will have to look it up in a minute. Gives you the ability to add a further -2. Now, if you add in maybe an Eldari flyer wing with hemlocks, then that gives you another -1. So there's potential there to really strip away the morale from either big units or really high leadership elite units that you might want to dispose of in a different way. Acolyte of the Ynnari. Use this is 1 CP, sorry. Use this stratagem before a Ynnari Psyker from your army attempts to manifest a psychic power from the Revenant discipline. Add 3 to the psychic test if any enemy units were destroyed this phase. So potentially, if one of your other Psykers has just finished off a unit with a smite maybe, you can add that in and you've got essentially pretty much a guaranteed cast with one of your other abilities. Could be really, really useful if you're clever with it. You've got Artifacts of Death, 1 for 3 CP, basically extra relics, it's the standard one. And then for 2 CP, Inevitable Fate. Use this stratagem at the start of your fight phase. Select 1 enemy unit, reroll wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by Ynnari units that target that unit at the end of the phase. Yeah, potentially useful, could be quite handy sometimes. Next, for 2 CP, Back from the Brink. Use this stratagem when a Ynnari infantry or Ynnari biker character from your army is destroyed. Roll 1d6 on a 4+, set that character back up again as close as possible to their previous position and more than 1 inch from any enemy models. with D3 wounds remaining. This stratagem cannot be used on the same character more than once per battle. Yeah, situationally, if you have got a character with a really useful relic or one of your psychic abilities that you really need to get off and they've just been picked off, potentially useful, I guess. 2 CP lightning fast reactions, pretty standard, so there's basically a -1 to hit. 1 CP, Souls of the Strongest. Use this stratagem when the enemy warlord is destroyed. Units from your army with the strength from death ability benefit from soul burst actions for the remainder of the battle, even if no unit has been destroyed during the subsequent turns. Let me redo that one. So we've got next Souls of the Strongest, 1 CP. Use this stratagem when the enemy's warlord is destroyed. Units from your army with the strength of death ability benefit from soul burst actions for the remainder of the battle, even if no unit has been destroyed during the subsequent turns. Pretty useful if you manage to pick off the enemy warlords early on for 1 CP. Play that, and then they have that strength and death ability all the way through without worry about killing other units completely. Useful. And everybody gets it as well, which is brilliant. 1 CP, Exalted of the Ynnari. Use this stratagem before the battle. Select 1 Ynnari character from your army that is not your ward and is not a named character. Generate a warlord trait from the Ynnari warlord traits table for them. There's some really good Ynnari ones, so that can actually be quite beneficial and give yourself some really nice buffs. 2 CP, Deadly Misdirection. Use this stratagem when a Ynnari unit from your army falls back. That unit can still shoot and charge this turn. I guess really good for Shining Spears, Harlequin bikes, Harlequin units as well, or big mobs, or witches, something like that can really sort of drop back, pump out some low grade firepower and then drop back into combat. 2 CP, Fire and Fade, your pretty standard shoot and then hide. You know, if you still have Dark Reapers in your Ynnari army, useful for them I guess, or bikes again, really useful for bikes, for hiding your Harlequin Haywire bikers, standard use. And then we've got Webway Ambush, 1 to 3 CP. Again, pick 3 units, or 1 to 3 units, hide them in the webway, drop them in. If you are going combat orientated with all the various low toughness, low save models, you're going to want to try and protect them as long as possible, so probably very useful. 1 CP, A Taste for Death. Use this stratagem when an enemy unit is destroyed as a result of an attack made with a ranged weapon by a Ynnari unit from your army. Add 1 to hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by that unit until the end of the turn. Situational, may be useful if there's one guy left and you have a load of shuriken pistols, say you pop them off, charge into a different unit, and that +1 to hit means your Harlequin troops are hitting on 2s. Quite nice. And for 1 CP, the Great Enemy. It's basically reroll failed runes against Slanish, so pretty standard that one. So next we'll be looking at the Ynnari psychic abilities, or the Revenant disciplines this is called. So again, now you can only cast, the Ynnari only cast psychics, only cast a Revenant discipline on Ynnari units, so they couldn't use it. Anything they used to buff a unit would only work for Ynnari. So let's go through these. First we've got the Gaze of Ynnari, which is warp cast value of 6, so it's drop 2, it used to be warp cast value of 8. If manifested, select 1 enemy unit that is within 8 inches and visible to the psychic and roll 1d6. On a 1, that unit suffers 1 mortal wound. On a 2 to 5, that unit suffers d3 mortal wounds, and on a 6, that unit suffers d6 mortal wounds. So actually, it's like a really powerful smite. It could potentially do really well. I quite like it. Let me do this one again, Harry. Sorry. So first we've got Gaze the Ynnari. Gaze the Ynnari has a warp charge value of 6, which has dropped down. It used to be a warp charge value of 8. Next we've Right. Right, so now we're going to look at the Ynnari psychic discipline, which is called the Revenant discipline. And the first one of these is Gaze the Ynnari. So this is the one you got in the original index, and this is now gone from a walk charge value of 8 down to a walk charge value of 6. If manifested, select one enemy unit that is within 18 inches and visible to the psyker and roll 1d6. On a 1, the unit suffers a multiple wounds. On a 2 to 5, that unit suffers d3 multiple wounds, and on a 6, that unit suffers d6 multiple wounds. So it's like a potentially more reliable smite, and of course you can still smite as well. So yeah, not too bad. Next we've got Storm of Whispers. Storm of Whispers has a walk chance value of 6. If manifested, roll 3d6 for each enemy unit within 6 inches of the psyker. For each result of 6 that the unit being rolled for suffers 1 mortal wound. Yeah, you're probably never going to take that. It's not worth it. Not for the 1 mortal wound. I think if you rolled 6 and it was a d3 or d6 mortal wounds, yeah, I think you might want to take it, but just to get 1 mortal wound on a unit, don't think it's worth it. Because the max you're going to get is 3 mortal wounds on a unit if you're very, very lucky, so yeah, don't think it's really worth it. Next we've got Word of the Phoenix. Now this has had a massive overhaul. So it's now a walk chance value of 5. If manifested, select one friendly Ynnari infantry or Ynnari biker unit within 18 inches of the psyker. One model in that unit regains d3 lost wounds. If no model in that unit has lost any wounds, but that unit has suffered 1 or more casualties, then 1 model is returned to that unit in unit coherency with 1 wound remaining. Now, considering what they've done to the rest of the unit, I really don't think that this needed changing. Basically, when you did it before, it gave you basically it meant you could make a soul burst with that unit. Now, obviously, with the way things have changed, it wouldn't be the same. So they could have reworded it in that you got a free shoot or a free move or something along those lines for a Ynnari infantry or Ynnari biker. I don't think it really needed to change, and I think if they wanted to change it, they could up the casting value of it, maybe to bring it up to if having a unit a free shoot or a free move was too OP, then raise it up to a walk charge value of 8, or walk charge 6 or 7 or 8 or something like that. Because with your range, she drops it back down to a 7. She still has the ability, a fairly good chance of casting it, and people still have a good chance tonight. So yeah, I mean, it's okay, I guess, if you want to bring someone back. It's just like having a medic around to bring everybody back, I guess, but I don't know if it's actually worth doing. But yeah, there might be something I'm missing with that. So next we've got Unbind Souls. Unbind Souls is a walk charge value of 6. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 18 inches of the psyker. Until the start of your next psychic phase, you can re-roll wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by Ynnari models from your army that target the enemy unit. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's okay if you're going to mob up and charge a big unit of orcs or a hard unit that you're going to struggle to get with through, and you just need those extra wings to go through. Yeah, potentially it kind of means you've got a little sort of bit of a mini Doom in combat, but selected into on one unit. But yeah, I think it's going to be quite good. Let me do this one again, Harry, sorry. So next we've got Unbind Souls. Unbind Souls is a walk charge value of 6. If manifested, select one enemy unit within 18 inches of the psyker. Until the start of your next psychic phase, you can re-roll wound rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by Ynnari models from your army that target that enemy unit. Now, potentially, I think this could be quite good. It's like a mini combat Doom. So if you've got a big unit of, I don't know, or a unit of custodes coming up to you, and you really need to get those wings through, you know, you can charge your guys in, they're re-rolling wings. You can hope you can get through those. So I think potentially it could be very useful. Also, there's a bit of synergy there. If you have an Eldari Craft Worlds unit beside that, and your Doom's something else, obviously your guys can't benefit from the Doom, but you've got a shooting thing that will Doom something, shoot it, kill it with that, and your Eldari combat troops going, so maybe you've got Craftwell's Shining Spears charging into them, something you could still cast this on them as well, and then charging your Ynnari witches or incubi or anything else you've got in the troops. Harlequin troops I think would benefit from this, Ynnari Queen troops would benefit from this quite well. Then we've got Shield of the Ynnari. Shield of the Ynnari has a warp charge value of 7. If manifested until the next psychic phase, friendly Ynnari units have 5+ invulnerable save whilst they are within 6 inches of the psycho. Yeah, it's potentially okay. Just means say you've got witches, instead of having a 6 up invulnerable to shooting, they have a 5 up. So potentially useful, I guess. Yeah, could be quite nice. And then finally we've got Ancestor's Grace. Ancestor's Grace is a warp charge value of 5. If manifested, select one friendly Ynnari unit within 18 of the psychic until the start of your next psychic phase. They re-roll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by the enemy. That's the same as one you've got in the index. So I think it was a real shame they changed Word of the Phoenix so much. I don't think that needed to happen. But there are some quite good powers there. Like there normally is, there's a couple you're just never going to take. I do quite like Gates of the Ynnari still good. I do quite like Unbind Souls. I think that could be really useful. And I think situationally Shield of the Ynnari could be quite good. Ancestor's Grace was always fairly good anyway, so yeah, you're probably always going to be taking that. Word of the Phoenix. Yeah, it depends how many cycles you've got really. I think if you've got a few cycles, it might be worth putting them on one. Yeah, because it is always nice to bring guys back. You know, if you've lost a Haywire Biker, to be able to bring a Haywire Biker back on 1 wound could be quite useful. Right, and then we're coming up to the end now, so we've got the relics next. Now you get 6 relics in here now, which is pretty good, and some of them are quite nice. So first we have Corrig Hayes Locket. Each time an enemy unit is destroyed by an attack made by the bearer, add 1 to the bearer's move and attack characteristic for the remainder of the battle. So that could be potentially quite useful if you've managed to get your character into combat with some smaller units that you can pick off, or get him to finish off units. You can keep adding 1 to the move and attacks, and by the looks of it that stacks, so the more guys your character kills, the more attacks and move and further he can move or she can move. So that could be potentially quite interesting if I think quite good possibly for a succubus, for an Archon, even for a Troop Master. I think could be really quite useful. And as it says, an attack made by the bearer, that could be shooting, psychic. So you could put it on a Shadow Seer, say. That could be quite useful because I've had great success with Shadow Seers. They've been some of my best characters I've used in my various Eldari armies, and I find them quite reliable at killing things. So that could actually be quite useful. Imagine getting your Shadow Seer racing across with 4 or 5 attacks. It can be quite potent. That could be quite good. I quite like that one. Next is the Song of the Ynnari. The model with the shrunken shuriken pistol only. Song of the Ynnari replaces the model shuriken pistol and has the following profile: 18 inches, pistol 3, 5, -1 AP, strength 5, -1 AP, damage 1. Each time you make a wound roll of a 6+ for this weapon, that attack is resolved with an AP -3. Each time an attack made by this weapon slays an enemy model, that target unit subtracts 1 from its leadership characteristic until the end of that turn. Now, think about all the other minuses we've thought about earlier. That could then add another 1 to that. If you chuck that on one of your characters, that could potentially be a -6 on a unit straight away, which could be quite entertaining and probably quite infuriating for your opponent. Again, very situational, I know, but when those dice roll the right way, it could be really disheartening and might lose you a lot of friends if you're not careful. It's not one you're going to see that often, but maybe if you're going up against low morale armies like Guard, or obviously if you can break the mob rule bit, maybe even Genestealer Cult with the acolytes and stuff like that, you can really smash down their morale. Yeah, potentially you could have some fun with that. Then you've got the Lost Shroud. Basically, all damage suffered by the bearer is halved, rounding up. In addition, roll 1d6 each time the model loses a wound. On a 5+, that wound is not lost. Yeah, quite good. Anything that reduces damage your guys take and has the potential to stop wounds is really, really useful. I think that's going to be quite a popular one. I think you'll probably see that on a lot, and I can imagine putting it on your Cheat Master or your Archon, or Succubus would be really good. I mean, potentially that could be pretty nasty. Next, we've got Hungering Blade, basically on a model arm with a power sword, Starglaive or Huskblade only. The Hungering Blade replaces the model's power sword, Starglaive or Huskblade, and has the following profile. The Hungering Blade, melee, obviously melee weapon, strength +3, AP -3, damage 2. Each unmodified wound roll of 6 made for an attack with this weapon inflicts inflicts a mortal wound on the target in addition to the normal damage. It's really nice. I would more than happily give that to my Archon or my Cheat Master, or Succubus, and just think of the damage they'll do. You know, really, really nice. I think you'll see. There's the potential to see that one a lot. Next, there's the Soul Snare. It basically looks a bit like a grenade. Once per game, instead of firing a ranged weapon in the shooting phase, the bearer can throw the soul snare. If they do so, select one enemy unit within 6 inches and visible to the bearer. On a roll and roll 1d6. On a 1, nothing happens. On a 2 to 5, the enemy suffers d3 mortal wounds, and the bearer gains the same amount of lost wounds. On a 6, that enemy unit suffers d6 mortal wounds, and the bearer gains all of their lost wounds. Again, very situational, and there's going to be that time you roll a 1, but there's also going to be those times when you roll a 6 just before your guy's about to die, and your your character's back up to full strength, and they've suffered 6 mortal wounds. Yeah, imagine doing that in the last 6 of Mortarion or Magnus or Gurlyman. Yeah, you're not going to be very popular, and it's going to be very entertaining. And then finally, we've got Mirror Gaze. It's basically subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target the bearer. So yeah, it's a -1 to hit, always useful. Yeah, I can see that being quite useful. But there's some really nice ones. I do like the Soul Snare. I think that could be really funny. I think you're probably going to see the Hungering Blade a fair bit, and I think the Lost Shroud is also going to be very, very popular. The pistol situation is useful. I think you may pick it potentially on low morale armies, but I do kind of like the idea of playing around with the locket. I think, yeah, giving it to the right character and getting that character into combat with the right units could then turn that character into a complete monster. I think, you could really be smashing people apart with that. But yeah, so there's some good ones actually. I think that's probably one of the best new bits of the Ynnari index. I think that the relics have been the strongest part of it from my point of view. I was slightly disappointed with some of the psychic abilities. Warlord trade's been pretty good, but I think yeah, really impressed with their relics. I think good. Right, so to summarise a little bit, what I think you'll be seeing more now with Ynnari, obviously it's gone right away from the old shooting element of it. So I think if you're going to take shooting, you're going to ally in, so you'd have a Latok, you chuck your Farseer, and you might take a cheap battalion, chuck a Farseer, and a Warlock, Guide Doom, and a big unit of Reaper still. You keep them something else so they could benefit from the Doom and the Jinx. Whereas where I think Ynnari really shines now is the combat element, and I think what you're going to be seeing a lot of probably, and again this is just my opinion, is Ynnari Quins. I think Harlequins really benefit from Ynnari now. I think you'll be seeing the Harlequin Treat Master, with the Hungering Blade, +3 strength, -3 AP, 2 damage, and on a 6 you're doing a mortal wound. I think that'd be a really strong combo. Or with the Correg Hayes Locket, every time you destroy, every time a unit is destroyed by an attack made by the bearer, add 1 to the bearer's move attacks characteristic. I think that could be pretty lethal. Make him your warlord, or give him a warlord trait anyway without making him your warlord for that CP. And I personally would give him the one, I think the Master of Death, I think that's what it is, yeah. Each unmodified hit roll of 6 made by attack with a melee weapon by this warlord scores 2 hits instead of 1. I think that could be really brutal. Or Lord of Rebirth, it just needs so basically he gets a wound back every turn, and then on a d6 on a 5+, that wound's not lost. I think put that on a Treat Master with that blade. I think he is going to be an absolute beast in combat. I think he's going to shred things. That sword is pretty tasty as it is, and then you know, if you've got the Master of Death and you're doing two wounds, 2 hits, sorry, instead of 1, and you get a couple of good rolls, he is going to be absolutely shredding people. So, and then maybe if you give him the Locket, you know, he's killing small units, he's getting an extra attack every turn. I mean, they've already got a fair few attacks anyway, 5 attacks base, so I think, yeah, you're going to be doing a lot more damage. One thing I think also you may well be seeing is the opportunity to take Aspect Warriors a bit more than they were previously. You know, a lot of people shunned the Eldari Aspect Warriors, the combat-based ones, the Banshees, the Scorpions, and that they didn't see them as worthwhile taking. Now you have the potential to give them invulns, you know, through psychic powers. You know, you can CP drop them in, webway strike them. You know, you may start seeing big units of, well, maybe not big units of striking Scorpions and Banshees. You know, Banshees are pretty tasty if you can get them into combat. I think the other thing you may well be seeing is big blobs of Storm Guardians. With all the re-rolls and buffs you can give them, I think they could be quite tasty in combat. I think you could get some of those and then they can do a lot of work. But I also think you'll be seeing the old standards. I still think you'll be seeing Shining Spears. I don't think they've done anything to sort of shy you away from those. I think where they had done it, I think they properly distracted people and put people off taking things like the Dark Reapers. I think, like I say, you'll probably be seeing those if they're going to be part of it, and if you're competitive playing, you're taking them to the tournament if the tournament allows a mixed faction. You know, I know several are going to single faction only. You know, so you may not be able to. But then I think if you're adding, yeah, so you won't be taking Dark Reapers in that unit, but then where you may be taking it is lots of Elf Jet Bikes. You know, they're still pretty useful in the Ynnari attachment. They're still pretty useful, and they threat a lot of shots. I think they can be really interesting as well. So I think where they've tried to push or stop you taking a more soupy list, actually they probably encouraged a little bit more soup to this. I think if you want a balanced army, I think you're going to have to soup to a degree. It depends how much you want to rely on your shooting. I think you could go pure combat, but I'm not entirely sure how how competitive that will be if that's what you're looking for. Fluff wise, I think you can do some really interesting fluffy lists with this. Like I said before, I think Ynnari Quins are going to be absolutely brutal. It's just because the sheer amount of attacks they throw out and the ability to make these guys, make them hit a lot harder with various buffs and abilities. It'll be really interesting to see what somebody comes up with. You know, someone is going to come up with an absolute dirty list out of this. You just know it. And I think although they've killed the first cookie cutter net list for Ynnari that used to be around with primarily Shining Spears and Dark Reapers, which, like I've said before, is pretty much just a click and play. You know, it just deletes units. There's not really a huge amount of finesse to play with this. The new sort of Harlequin build that I would be tempted to build has the potential to be quite interesting without being ridiculously overpowered. I think also another potential strong build is a leadership debuff. I think I worked it out earlier with adding in Hemlocks, the various psychic abilities, having a Death Jester. You can get it up to about a -7, which means you pop one character in a unit, even of high leadership troops, you're still going to be making another one run away. I don't think that's one that's highly competitive, and I don't think that's one that's going to pan out for you all the time, because obviously a lot of things have to fall into place and the rolls have to go the right way for you, but it could be potentially very interesting. I'm tempted to try one with sort of late up Hemlocks and maybe a cheap Witch Covenant Ynnari army, and see how I get on with that. That could be quite good fun. But yeah, that's certainly another interesting combo. I think that the psychic abilities overall are really good. I'm a bit annoyed with the Phoenix. I don't think that needed to change as much as it did. I think that was they could have done something a lot better with that. Still, maybe to give you a little bit more shooting or movement, but just whacked up the casting value of it to an 8. You know, I think this Ynnari build is missing out on some shooting a little bit, and especially as some of the stratagems require, well, I think one of them requires you to kill a unit with shooting, which you're not really designed to do now. You're designed to run up on a big face. You know, that seems to be where everything is going. Even your psychic ability is more towards buffing that. There's 2 offensive psychic ability. Well, if you include smite, apologies. There's 2. There's the mortal wound bomb, which I don't think you're ever really going to see because it's not reliable enough. And then there's basically their own version of smite. So I think one of the combos you'll be doing is doing the psychic ability that lets you do multiple wounds, and then playing the stratagem to put +3 on the next casting and going for the super smite. I think that's what you're going to be trying to do. But again, situational. You know, there's going to be opportunities and times where you think, actually, this is going to work. I'm going to crack out and do this now, and it will hurt someone a lot. Maybe times where it fails miserably. So, just rounding up, I think that pretty much covers Ynnari now. I think they're going to be an interesting addition again. I don't think you'll be seeing them at the top tables for a while until someone comes up with something truly filthy. But you never know. You know, someone might have an idea already and what to do. I'm certainly been playing through with a few builds. I'll be really interested to see if anybody else has any ideas. So if you want to link any army lists below, really interesting. So thank you very much for listening to me waffle on, guys. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please bear in mind this is my first time doing one of these on my own, so like I say, I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, follow and subscribe Harry's channel. He does a really good job and really supports us as patrons as much as we support him. I'm sure I'll put a link to his Patreon site, so if you want to support him that way, please do so. Thank you very much and have a lovely evening.